Hello everyone. I'm currently in the process of quitting boxing. I've been a member of a boxing gym training with the intention of fighting for about 9 months now. And I had always had this preconception in my mind that I'll box until I start to notice problems, until I start to notice a little bit of fatigue in my brain, until I start to notice maybe my shoulder going or my eyesight going, or maybe I knock a tooth out. And then by the time that I'll be having those problems, the trade-off will have been still worth it for me, because I'll have had years of boxing, years of combat experience and disciplining myself in martial arts, and only a little bit of the downsides. That had been my preconception, all right? The problem with that is the more that you study CTE and what these combat sports can do to your brain, the more that idea just becomes unrealistic. The reality is, whenever you take shots to your head and even shots to your body in a way, whenever you take anything that rattles your brain and your head, that causes something called a subconcussion or a microconcussion. It's not enough to give you a complete concussion that's diagnosed, and it's 2.5 times better for your brain to take one of those than a real concussive hit. But the problem is, in something like a combat sport or even a regular sport that just includes contact like football, these still impact your brain. And it's 2.5 times less than a regular concussion, but you take these hits all the time, especially if you're in something like boxing where you're taking hits to your head, and it's worse for your brain whenever the punch rotates your head. So think about every punch for boxing, a 3, a 5, something, anything that's really going to rotate your head upwards to the side is going to be rotating your brain in a way that is going to damage the neurons, and specifically like the highways in your brain. These are called your tau proteins, and it's going to hurt your brain, and you might not notice it for a while. And I need to stop saying "and." All right, back to the video. You might not notice these problems for a while, and you're not going to notice them until about 10 years down the line after your career's over. That's when the CTE symptoms really start to pop up. And depending on how many shots to your head that you've taken and how resilient your brain is, which is a genetic thing, it's not promised that you'll get CTE after taking 100,000 hits, but some people will. Probably most people. Most people will likely get CTE from that. So you're not going to know if you're going to get brain damage until 10 years down the line after you finish your career. And guys, that's just a risk that's not worth taking. Unless, of course, it's your passion, and if it's what God had molded you to become, he created you and he thought, okay, Billy, you're going to be a boxer and you're going to impact the boxing community in a way that they all can see me and honor me. And this is what you're created for. And this is what I'm going to full-heartedly support you in. Billy, this is your purpose. Unless that's the case with you, the brain damage is likely not worth it. You can't just get a little bit of brain damage in boxing and get out. By the time that you notice it, you're already going to be at what's known as stage 3 CTE. That's the noticeable CTE. Stage 2 is very minorly noticeable, but it's also something that progresses. So whether you're at stage 2 or stage 3, if you're still in that combat sport, you've done so much damage to your brain that it's almost guaranteed to advance to dementia. And CTE is such an unstudied thing that we don't really have a cure for it. I'm sure there's ways to slow it down, but the real cure and the real way to deal with it is just to prevent it. And if you think that headgear is going to help you prevent it, you're just wrong. You're wearing your headgear and it's going to stop your face from getting bruised, but you're still taking the punch. Your head's still moving backwards, and then your brain's still going to rock in your skull. And you're going to get those problems. Jesus says in the Bible, when Peter is taking out some guard in the garden, he pulls out a sword. They're arresting Jesus, and Peter takes his sword and he chops off one of the guard's ears. And Jesus tells him, bro, If you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And that's what boxing is. That's what these contact sports are. You're going in the ring with someone else and you're a gladiator for a night. And that's something that was really appealing for me. It was a 1v1 with another man. And it's probably the most masculine thing that you can do, is getting in the ring with someone else and just testing your might with them. But it's not worth sacrificing your brain. Once these pathways, these tau proteins that I was talking about earlier, get damaged, they start to clump up in areas, and it just worsens. Because these are going to be transmitted through your brain. The more hits that you have for your brain's not going to be able to keep up. So once you damage your brain, it's just going to progressively get worse and worse as you age. And you can see this with all of these boxers. There's a boxer, I'm gonna link his video, I'm gonna put his name on the screen. I don't necessarily remember his name, but he was in the golden age with Muhammad Ali and all of them. And he kept boxing till he was about 50 years old consistently. And when he had the brain damage symptoms, he figured, I still have my photographic memory. I'm not going to stop. I don't believe that I have these brain problems. He agreed to a brain scan because maybe he had some brain fog or something, but he took the results and he just decided, I don't believe him. I'm going to keep boxing. And that's what he did. And he ended his life in a daycare, an adult daycare, where they ask him, what's your favorite color? What did you do? And he shows them a 1-2 and they're like, man, that's great. Was it worth it? That's what they asked him. They asked him if he had kids, would he let them box? And he looked them dead in the eyes and he said no. Because of what it had done to his brain, he didn't want that same fate for his kids. And that's what the warrior lifestyle almost guarantees. I really just wanted to warn against the notion that I had of you can just get a little brain damage and then you can stop. The truth is, by the time that you have a little brain damage that is noticeable enough, it's going to be too late. So essentially, you're gambling with your life energy towards the end of your life. You're gambling with your longevity. Every time you step in that ring, every time you spar, you're roughing up your brain a little bit more. And maybe it's not going to be enough. Maybe you can spar and just box for a couple years, have a decent career, and then you quit. And everything will be fine, and maybe you'll notice no problems with your brain, and you'll die after living a long life around a loving family and be happy. But the way that I'm coded, whenever I decide to commit to something like boxing, some sort of a sport, I go all in with it, and I want to become good as possible. How do you become good as possible in boxing? You spar. Once you learn the fundamentals, you learn basically everything in sparring. Correct me if I'm wrong and there's some other form of training, but that's how I was trained. You want to be in fighting shape? I'm not going to force you to spar, but that's how you do it. You spar. You get in there with someone else, and even in light sparring and tap sparring, your brain still gets rocked a little bit. You don't know what these subconcussive blasts are, and I don't either. But it's a risk every time that you step in that ring. And for me, I think about my ultimate purpose. I decide, okay, if I'm going to box, I'm probably going to go all in and I'm going to fight and I'm going to try to get as fast as possible in boxing. Because I'm competing with these kids who've been in boxing for 15 years by the time they're 15. They've been in the gym their whole life. That's who the pro boxers are going to be, and that's who your competition is going to be. So how do you beat them? You have to outwork them. And you have to risk more than they do. And that's the life of a gladiator. You have to train harder than all of these people, and you have to be able to do things that they're not willing to do. The problem is people don't think about brain damage, so everyone is willing to spar. Everyone is willing to put in the work that's probably going to mess them up and give them dementia. Stage 4 CTE is dementia. So if you don't want to lose your brain and you want to remember your kids' names, then either don't have a really long boxing career, or I just think you shouldn't risk it at all. Unless it's literally what you were created for. When I think about, okay, when I ask God, what was I created for? What's my purpose? I believe that God gives me my desires. And I have an intense desire to teach. I want to post YouTube videos and teach people. And I think that God has given me the gift of a brain that's able to ponder and look into the future in a way that other people can't. Not in a way that I'm reading the future, but just being able to have that perspective. I think he gave me the gift of perspective. And by boxing, I am actively dishonoring that gift that God gave me. Whenever you're given a gift, you have to steward it and you have to grow it. If God gave you a gift of a beautiful voice, you wouldn't use it. You wouldn't abuse your voice. You wouldn't be vocal frying and screaming at the top of your lungs all the time. You would preserve it. You don't take advantage of the gifts that you're given. That's just a human lesson. Everybody knows that. So you shouldn't be doing that with the gifts that God has given you. So sure, I could probably box for a couple years and be fine. But I want to steward my brain, and I want my diet to be in a way that honors that gift that I was given and honors God, because my body's a temple. Whatever happens in this world isn't necessarily up to me, because I've decided by giving my life to him that I want God's will to be done. And I honestly think at this point in time that teaching is the way that I'm going to help advance God's kingdom. And I believe that that's what his will is for me. So with all of this knowledge, I pondered, am I going to quit boxing? I haven't been to the gym in 3 days, and it's been really hard. The first day, things got hard. The first day I realized that I was going to quit, I started freaking out. That was such a big part of my plan. A half a tub of ice cream. I've been struggling with food for a while, and I've been doing pretty good, but that sent me over the edge. Things got hard, and I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't sober-minded. Things went AWOL, and it wasn't a part of my plan to quit boxing. I really do like the warrior lifestyle, and I do think that that's how my brain's coded, and I enjoy competition. I enjoy the flow state that being in the ring with someone puts me in. I enjoyed the fact that I got hit and I wasn't able to react or think for a second. It was such an interesting thing to me how getting dazed impacted how you would box. And that's something that's going to be irrelevant to me. I am glad that I did put 9 months into boxing, and I do think that doing a martial art like that, where you learn to become a warrior, you learn to become dangerous, is an important thing for basically all men. I do think that everyone should do like 6 months of boxing, but having an extended career that goes across years, I think the statistic is that every year increases your chances of CTE by 2.8 times. That's 280%. Every year. That's crazy. They say that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes, and I thought that was something that you could avoid just by keeping your insulin levels in shape and being healthy. And dementia is basically the same thing as Alzheimer's in my mind. And taking those repeated blows to your brain are going to hurt your brain. That makes sense. You can't just expect that you'll be different. Especially as a follower of Christ, I feel the way that God works is he's gracious and he's kind. But if you're going into something thinking it couldn't possibly be me, then it's probably going to be you. When I was a lifeguard, I quit lifeguarding as of now, but I used to be a lifeguard, and when I got hired, and I was terrified that I wasn't qualified for the job, that I wasn't up to the task. And I was sitting there in my guard chair, and I was just scared that someone would start drowning. And then I started to think, oh, it shouldn't be me. I'm brand new. Saves don't happen all that often. And then I had 3 saves. In the next month or so, every other save was me. I had to jump in and save some kid that was drowning, and luckily I was able to, because I did have the skills. I just wasn't confident in them. And that first month I had 3 saves. Then I was a lifeguard for another 2 years. Or another year. Nothing. I guarded every day for the whole summer. I traded my life energy for a paycheck so that I could actually dedicate myself to this purpose of teaching online. Not a single save. I worked for 3 months, about 40 hours a week, every week. Nothing. And I think it's funny that that's the way that God works. Or maybe it's the devil. You think of the book of Job. Job is absolutely tormented. He has all this faith in God. He's basically God's strongest warrior at the time. And the devil says, I can make him stop following you. And God says, you want to bet? I'll show you my glory. I'll show everyone my glory. I'll make this a book in the Bible. And the devil tempts Job. He gives him all these problems. He takes away every single family member that he has, takes away all of his possessions. And Job keeps his faith. And before that time, the devil made a promise to God. I won't touch him. And then the devil tells him, after all of this, okay, he still has his faith, but it's because he has his health. So God says, okay, go a little further. My man's going to keep his faith, and I'm going to reward him for it. So Satan gives Job some boils. I believe it's boils. Please correct me in the comments or something if I'm wrong. It's a pretty big detail to mess up. But I think the devil gives him boils. And Job's friends are all like, dude, this God thing ain't working out for you. You're having all these problems. And Job defends God. He tells him, no, I'm going to keep my faith. And he kept these boils for like a month or something. And then God comes through. All my dogs come to say hi. Come here, Blue. Guys, this is my dog, Blue. Little surprise feature. Anywho, Job gets through all this torment, and suddenly God shows up. And even though he kept his faith and he defended God to all of his friends, God still rebukes him. God still tells him, do you not understand that I tell each lightning bolt where to go when it thunderstorms? Do you not understand that I have this perfect plan, and you're just a piece in it? And you think that you can know better than me? There's no way that we can know better than God. And Job's rewarded for his faith. He seemed to have led almost a perfect life, and people would say, oh, Job was a good person. He didn't deserve that. But it was an act of faith that he stayed steadfast in the Lord. He held his composure even when the bad things happened. And then he was blessed. There's no doubt in my mind that Job made it to heaven. I guess there could be doubt because I don't know exactly what the Bible says about that off the top of my head. And in reality, only God knows that. But Job expressed faith, and they made a book out of him. And bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen whether you want them to or not. And you can think that it's not going to happen to you all you want, but that's not promised. Jesus tells us to pick up our cross. So there's going to be a cross for you. There's going to be some sort of trials, and it's going to make you stronger, and it's going to add to your testimony and make you a weapon for the Lord. So I'd say, especially if you're a Christ follower, don't expect that it's not going to be you. So maybe that's a risk that's worth it for some of you guys. And maybe for some of you, it's not. For me, when I thought about it, I realized I needed my brain. So it wasn't a risk that was worthwhile for me. So I quit boxing without a second thought. Now my only hobbies are this and paintball and like weightlifting and stuff. Gotta keep the muscles big. Yeah, I think that's all I got. I want you guys to watch the video about the man that I link. He's an old school boxer. He's with Muhammad Ali and all the greats, Joe Frazier. And the only reason he wasn't a world champion was because he was fighting in heavyweight in the golden age. He was an amazing boxer. And he got dementia. I feel like a lot of boxers have this live fast, die hard mentality. And I notice that when I see them walking into the gym eating Skittles, they all have a FBGM mindset. I'm not going to explain what that is. If you truly don't know, you can look it up. But I'm going to assume that you all know what that is. And if all you're concerned about are girls and money, you're going to lose. And I felt that that was all of their concerns. They didn't have the same values as I had. And I guess I can't force them to. I can't force them to expand their focus onto their longevity. But I can choose to walk away. When I think of walking away from the boxing gym, I'm really not losing all that much. It's not like they were friends that I needed to have. I think I was more so evangelizing towards them. So I'm not necessarily torn that I lost all of my connections. And even though I'm leaving, I could have kept their contacts. I do have all of their contacts. So I could have stayed in touch. They say that whenever you join martial arts, you gain a lot of friends, but some people just aren't in it for the discipline. Or maybe they are and they're struggling. And those people that are and struggling and express a want to get better, those are probably the best friends that you can have. But I'm not going to fight anymore. And that's scary. But you got to trust in God's plan. And this CTE thing is a real problem. And it's something that's not very well understood because we just haven't researched it all that much. It's a silent killer in athletes, and there's a lot of athletes with diagnosed CTE, and when they get it, when they lose their brain, a lot of them end up killing themselves. And that's a scary thing. Once you lose your brain, it's all done. Imagine if you couldn't think thoughts. Like, that's a crazy thought. And that's the reality for some people. That was everything I wanted to say. If you watched this far, maybe leave a like on the video. It really would help me out. I am trying to grow. I am trying to make money with this. So I would really appreciate it if you did. Maybe subscribe. That's all I got. Peace out, everyone.